Thank you.
Hey, welcome to United Opposition with Scott and Mike today. Because Marshall,
could you say Mike Scholl?
Mike Scholl? No, we're not going to do that to Marshall. No, United Opposition with Scott and Mike today. Marshall's out for today. Mike decided to step in. We're going to talk about Christianity, church, and politics. Let's go. Well, yes, welcome to United Opposition. My name is Scott Garcia. This is
Mike Harvey.
Mike Harvey sitting in for Marshall, and I am leaning back in this chair. My back is still out. I'm finding a position that I can kind of be comfortable in. So hopefully we can make it through this day.
If you guys are out there, be praying for Scott.
Yes, please. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Everybody asks me, "What'd you do?" I'm like, I don't know. One day it just got getting worse and worse and worse and worse. But
you got stressed out and your back knotted up.
I know. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe all the politics here in America just stressed me out, and I'm carrying all that weight in my hip.
I think it could stress you out if you take it the wrong way.
It's nice that you got the memo so we dress the same.
We did. We got the same shirt on. Are you wearing flip flops?
I am not wearing flip flops.
Right.
That's the only leg that I can lift up, by the way. Oh, okay.
We got the same Apple Watch.
Right. So I don't have my traditional cup of coffee, but tell us what I'm missing.
Hope in a Cup. Covenant Coffee, covenantcoffee.org. Go check them out online. Or if you're in Bakersfield, they got 2 locations. One is on North Chester. One is on Mohawk in California. Go support these guys because they do an amazing job supporting our youth in Kern County, especially the emancipated foster youth. They provide jobs, job training, life support, life training. I don't want to say life support. I don't mean like life support, like where Scott used to work at, but support in general in life. They really help these guys from becoming another statistic, which sadly the emancipated foster youth way too often end up in human trafficking, suicide, drug abuse, overdose, homelessness, and all of these things. So Randy Martin, shout out to you. We're going to get Randy back in the studio here real soon.
Good. All right. Well, we were talking yesterday. I was on with Adrian's podcast yesterday.
Adrian Monhay.
Yeah, Adrian Monhay with Ministry Matters. I was talking with him, and afterwards we talked for about an hour.
We did, long time.
Yeah, talked, and finally we're like, and you said, well, the next time that because we actually were kind of in disagreement about something. This is a very slight disagreement.
Yeah, minor
disagreement.
Yeah.
Just more of a disagreement in
approach.
Yeah, more of a disagreement in approach, not a disagreement in what we believe and stuff like that. Let me get this mic up a little bit higher for me.
That's right.
And got to kiss them. Got to be able to kiss the mic.
I'm so used to it being like right basically in my mouth.
Yeah. And but we were talking, and he said, man, next time Marshall can't make it on the show, we should talk about this. I'm like, okay. And Marshall just couldn't make it today. He's recovering from some I don't want to get into a lot of detail. I just had
medical.
Went to the doctors. He's in recovery. He's fine. It was something that was scheduled.
Marshall, we're praying for you. We hope you're doing well, brother.
Absolutely. I hope I'm not giving away, saying too much. Here's his medical file, and here's what's going on. We're going to talk about that today.
We're going to break HIPAA laws.
HIPAA violations going on. No,
in the IT company.
Yeah. There we go. No, but so he told me today. He said, "Hey, I'm still recovering," and I said, "Okay, perfect. That's Mike had already said. Maybe we can have this discussion." But basically, I'm just going to kind of lead in. Normally, Mike and I have a topic, and then we kind of come from the two, say what our two sides are.
You mean you and Marshall?
Sorry. Oh my gosh. I've already kicked off Marshall from the show. Sorry about that.
Sorry, Marshall, for insulting. Darius, let's keep an eye on the comments too.
Yeah. Hopefully Marshall, I'm hoping Marshall's is joining us, and maybe he might. Yeah, there he is. Okay. Yeah. He's telling me hippo who?
Hippopotamus.
Yeah. So sorry about that. Sorry, Marshall, that I called. But normally Marshall and I we'll kick off the show, and we'll kind of do a little 1-minute intro on what we're going to say about the topic, and then kind of go into it. But just slightly different today. We were talking yesterday. We're both Christians. Mike and I are both Christians. Went to the same church for many, many years.
We worked together in the same office.
Together. That's right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we shared offices. That's right. That was
way back.
That's way back. We shared
like
offices
20 years ago.
It was you, me, and there was one other person.
Jennifer?
No. I can't remember right now. There was somebody else. Was it Esmond?
No.
I can't remember. But there were 3 of us in this tiny little office for a brief amount of time.
It was a decent sized office.
It was all right.
You got hooked up, dude, on that office. So you had it by yourself for a while.
Yeah, and by myself was good, but for 3 people it was a little bit small. But yeah, so we share similar beliefs and everything. But I'm a little bit different. I'm just going to kind of express. I have a very logical, and very, very compartmentalized. I'm really able to compartmentalize things. I know that typically it's kind of a man thing anyway, the way our brains are kind of hardwired at birth. But I approach things from a certain perspective. Like what's the perspective to approach this? And in the types of things that we talk about on these shows and what you talk about on your show, about politics and religion and other kind of stuff, I kind of have a separation in that I can speak like, this is my belief as a Christian, and this is how I'm going to respond and act as a Christian, as a pastor. This is, what are my beliefs? It's not like different principles, but how I'm going to carry it out. I believe this as a Christian. I believe this thing. This is what I'm going to do as a Christian. But as an American, I have sometimes a completely different perspective in that there may be things that I believe in as a Christian, but I would not necessarily advocate to do on the political realm as an American. I feel that, just to kind of jump into an example real quick, what I'm talking about is something simple, is saying, should we make it law that we have the 10 Commandments in the schools? And as a Christian, I like that. As a Christian, I believe in the 10 Commandments. As a Christian, I believe in raising our kids and raising people to understand right and wrong, and that the 10 Commandments is a great place to start. That is God's law, and from that natural law that we talk about. And I think it's a great thing to talk about. I think it's a great thing to have in a classroom. As an American, I don't necessarily like that idea, because as an American, if I'm putting those up that are Christian, then how many people am I disenfranchising who don't believe in Christ? But even like how does a Muslim feel that now the law says there's 10 Commandments from the Bible up there? Or how does an atheist feel? But beyond that, how would I feel if it wasn't my party that was doing this, but another party that was putting how would I feel if all schools were required to have the Quran in the school? How would I feel if all put X, whatever I disagree with, what if they had the power and they're making it law and trying to write laws to put their ideology in school? And so as an American, I don't necessarily like the idea of Christian ideology in politics. But as a Christian, I understand that's what we need to do as Christians. And I think the biggest thing for me is that here in America, I think there is a great confusion among Christians in America, that I think people tie their patriotism and their country too closely to their faith and their religion. And I think that can get very, very dangerous. What do you think, Mike?
Well, so I think that my answer is a little bit more nuanced, because I view myself from this kind of perspective. I'm a Christian first and foremost.
Okay.
Secondly, I'm an American patriot. At least I would like to consider myself an American patriot. And I think most of my friends, as well as you, would consider me one.
Yeah.
But I see the slippery slope that we've been on for quite a long time. And I see the direction that our country's been headed in. I am optimistic, and I shared this on my show this morning, that it seems like the country's making a turn for the right direction. And we'll see how that continues to go down. But I have young children, and I'm concerned for the future that they're facing and the future that we're going into. And I think that there needs to be more morality and more values, more traditional values brought back in. I think I'm not in total opposition to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a little bit more nuanced, because I can see that there's certain areas where I think there should be more laws, but I also don't think that there should be too many laws,
Okay.
right? Because we talked about this idea of protecting people, right? And we kind of separated a little bit on, like, you're very strictly tied to the protection being just physical harm, and I'm more looking and associating that protection with mental harm as well, because I think
just to clarify, not just physical harm, but objectively identifiable harm. Mm-hmm. To where it's not subjective, to where somebody's saying, well, that hurt my kid's feelings, or we don't believe that, you can't.
Sure.
That's more of a subjective. That's harming my kids. What part? That's harming my kid's ideology. Okay, well, that's subjective. I think the law should be there to protect against objective harm.
So how risque can we get on your show, Scott? Because this is your show. This is my show.
I mean, well,
Can we
speak the truth.
go into full depth about like what we talked about?
Just watch your language. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, what we talked about. Yes.
So we talked about the idea of just as an example
Yep.
to demonstrate. We talked
And,
about
and Marshall made a comment. I want to come back to it in a moment, so I don't want to forget. I see the we're kind of going down. I'm going to come back to that, Marshall. I'm going to come back to that, and I think it's a great comment.
Okay. We talked about this idea of the
Story time.
transgender story hour, or that was not the word.
No, it was it was
Drag queen story
drag
hour.
queen story hour. Yep.
And I said, I don't think that should be allowed to, certainly shouldn't be allowed to be in schools, but I don't think it should be allowed to be, and it certainly shouldn't be endorsed or funded by taxpayer dollars in our public libraries. I think we need to draw a line, because at what point, where do we draw the line?
Mhm.
Because I also, and I'm going to take some heat on this. I might even take some heat from Marshall. Marshall, it's okay. I love you. We haven't had an opportunity to talk. I would love to talk to you. But we even talked about homosexual marriage, right?
Yep.
And I don't think that should be allowed, because marriage is an institution created by God.
Mhm.
I don't think that we should be disgracing that institution by allowing things that God clearly calls sin to take on a moniker of something that is a God-ordained institution.
So, along that same line, playing devil's advocate, along that same line, we're going to play footsie here too. Sorry. But along that same line, I'm going to challenge you. So then divorce cannot be allowed then either legally, based on that same argument, because it disgraces a sacred thing that God has created.
I think if you go to the Bible, God permits divorce under certain circumstances. So and
Jesus kind of came and said, because of your stubborn heart, Moses allowed that. But that's not.
But at what point?
Hold on. But Jesus said, let me finish. Jesus said, because of your stubborn heart, Moses allowed that. But that was never. Jesus said that was not how it was supposed to be.
But at what point did Jesus say, well, because of your stubborn heart, we're also going to allow drag queen story hour. We're also going to allow homosexual marriage. We're also going to allow, what are these people that are child lovers and all these other. It never said that.
Right.
It said, I'm going to allow divorce because of your stubborn heart. Right. So I think there is a line.
Okay. All right. I just think, but your argument was that it degrades. It was where you said disgraces the sanctity of marriage. Divorce disgraces the sanctity of marriage as well.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I'm not for divorce either, Scott.
Exactly. So. I understand that, but you don't have a problem with making divorce illegal. You have a problem with making homosexual marriage illegal. And so I believe that's an inconsistency on your part, because it's subjective. That's why when it comes to laws in the country, I feel like we have to make sure that we stay objective in our laws, so that the subjective is up to the person. Because here's the thing, and this is great. I'm going to go to Marshall's comment that he made right here. He said the church flourishes when it's under persecution and focuses on the gospel. When the church is associated with the establishment or becomes the establishment, it turns corrupt and distracted. And I think that's a really good point about not trying to let the church be the state. And effectively this discussion kind of comes down to, the separation of church and state, and where that is. And again, I believe that separation was made to protect the church from the state, not to protect the state from the church. But going back to,
but taking Marshall's statement at face value, I don't disagree with what he's saying.
Yeah.
I do think that and Scott, you and I have been probably closer than vast majority of people to the inner workings of church, and we know that it can become corrupt, right?
Yep.
So yeah, if we're doing things ritualistically and just for appearances, and we're trying to do those things, yeah, absolutely. But I do think that there is a place. Not just a place. I think that there is a responsibility of the church to speak the truth in love. That's bold, underline, in love. I think that there's a responsibility for the church to speak the truth. And I also think that there is very much a responsibility for Christians to be involved in politics, because if we're absent from politics, then the only people running the country are the atheists.
No. And I agree that we need, that Christians need to be taking their place in politics. But being a Christian in politics and trying to create laws that support Christianity, I think, are two different things. And I think if you're trying to create laws that support Christianity, you're starting to lean towards the idea that Marshall says is kind of dangerous. And I agree that now we're making the established governance a church, and tying
Yeah,
the church
I agree
to
with that
established
too.
government, and that's where it starts to get dangerous. Now, again, I'm gonna read Marshall's comment coming to you, and I would have an answer for this as well. But he says restricting trans from the library, is that any different than restricting persons of color from going to someplace similar?
Yeah, it's vastly different because people of color don't have a choice. People of color were not born. I mean, people of color were born that color. The race, take race off the table, because if a man was born a man and a woman was born a woman, and when they die, when the paleontologists find their bones in 5,000 years from now, they're going to say this was a man and this was a woman, not what did they feel like they might have been at the moment.
Got it. So you're saying that the main difference is because they were now people are going to say, especially some of the homosexual side are going to say, but I was born, God made me this way. I was born this way. And
that's I mean, okay, so this is where I always go with this, and it's I in my opinion, Scott, and you're welcome to refute this, you're welcome to argue with me, Marshall, you're welcome to argue with me, or anybody out there who's watching is welcome to argue with me. I invite that. I'm not afraid of a lively conversation. But that's like a drug baby saying I was born a drug addict, so why can't I just be a drug addict?
Gotcha.
Right.
And
the
here,
Bible clearly calls both of those things a sin.
And here's the thing. So, because I was thinking about this, somebody saying, being asked that question, am I going to hell because I'm homosexual?
No,
you're going to hell because you're a human.
Right.
I'm going to hell because I'm a human.
And to make a point, and I think that this is an important point, God hates sin, right? He doesn't hate the sinner. God says, love the sinner, hate the sin.
And people are going to respond with that saying, but this is who I am. So you're saying, how can God hate this part of me when that defines who I am?
Well, guess what? I've lied before. God hates it when I lie too. Yeah. So am I a liar because I've told a lie, or is it a corrupted sin nature that has caused me to make a stupid human fleshly decisions?
Yeah, I think to go into Marshall's a question on that, restricting trans people from library different than restricting people of color from doing something similar. I think that what you are trying, tell me if I'm wrong, another part of that is you feel that it's not just them coming into a library. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about literally the library saying, children, listen to these, look at these people, we support these people, and we want you to listen to what they have to say about trans and to be able to push this as normal. I think that's probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the fact that part of society wants to tell your kids that this sinful action should be considered normal is what you want to stop. Is that
exactly
right?
100%?
Okay.
Yes.
So and you and I are in the same, again, as a Christian, I don't want somebody coming into the classroom. And if my kids were in public school, I don't want somebody coming into the classroom and telling my kids that this sinful act or this sinful lifestyle is okay and you must accept that. I don't want my kids to see that. I don't want my kids to be taught that. However, I don't know for sure because that's a subjective harm. I feel like my kids are being harmed in their beliefs by these people bringing their, what I call sinful, what God calls, but since I agree with God, calls sinful lifestyle. I don't want my kids seeing that. But at the same time, since there's not, I don't know, maybe there can be studies that show that this is an objectively harmful thing to do to kids. And then, because I think if there's objectively harmful things being done, I think that the law should be saying, that this is illegal. If it's objectively harmful, you hit somebody, you punch somebody, you sexually assault somebody, possibly even, it's very subjective when you get into verbal and emotional.
If you start finding ideologies in children's brains that ultimately lead to mental illness, I think that's harmful.
But again, objectively defining it as a mental illness. Can that be done?
It was not that long ago that many of these activities were defined as mental illness.
That's true. And it's possible that it can be done. It's possible that can be proven. And if people are willing to study that now, I don't know that people would be willing to study that anymore because they fear of being canceled. But that's where I stand is I think laws should be created and enforced to protect people from objective dangers, things that is clearly objectively defined as harm. You can't shoot somebody, you can't stab somebody, you can't steal from somebody, you can't physically harm them, you can't rape them, you can't, that things that's what the law should be done. Because again, someday, and America was leaning this way, could still lean this way, to where Christian ideology could be outlawed.
Well, so this goes back to part of this conversation goes back to a First Amendment right?
Yeah.
Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of all of these things. What is it that turns out this is?
What if it turns out that this is not objectively harmful? Yeah, that's my question. Marshall just asked that. But what if it turns out that you cannot prove that drag queen story hour is objectively harmful? My position is then you really can't write a law about it. And I don't think we should be writing a law about it. But I don't know if you agree.
Well, so going back to what I was going to say, so I'm glad that Marshall made that point. What I will say is there's many things that people will say that I vehemently disagree with.
Yeah.
But I will also fight for their First Amendment right
Yeah.
to be able to say it. However, that said, I also think that there's an appropriate time and place to say those things.
Okay, so maybe you're saying school is not the appropriate time and place.
Bingo.
Okay, all right. So I can see that as an argument coming in, as a legitimate argument for that. But yeah, it's again, I was seeing a few years ago the idea of that a certain ideology was more in power previously, a few years ago, to where, with cancel culture and everything like that, where it was like you just cannot, if you I could see it coming at that time very soon, that laws could be written that you cannot say in church that homosexuality is a sin, that would be codified in law. That would be somebody putting their ideology into law that violates my rights. So I'm always very cautious about, am I trying to ask for a law to be written based on my ideology that could potentially take away someone else's rights as an American, not as a Christian, but as an American. So that's what makes, I always want to see it from that perspective is what I'm doing is am I trying to use my ideology to codify law to take away somebody else's rights? I don't want to be that.
Well,
Christian.
I would agree with you on that.
I don't want to be that Christian.
And I want to agree with what Marshall's saying in the comments again here. Everything should be age appropriate. 100%, Marshall. I agree with that. There's a time and a place for everything. Usually that's college. And I think at that time, people are classified as now there's a very strong argument that can be made that a youth today, when they get to be 18 college age, that they're not actually adults because they're not mature enough. But I think that's like a whole nother show and a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
Because that goes into like, really, that falls on the parents. But
Marshall comment on here said to be born a certain way is not a sin. And as a Christian, I have to disagree because we are all born as sinners.
Actually, I'm going to agree with Marshall on this. To be born a certain way is not a sin. You're 100% accurate on that. Yeah. But to be born a certain way is one thing. To be born predisposed to sin is another thing. And to be born predisposed to a sin and then choose to give into that sin just because you were born predisposed to it, that's a sin.
Yes, but again, I like to just simplify it. And, going back to the argument. So yes, we were all born into sin. We were all born as sinners. I was born as a heterosexual man and I really like women. And that can get me into a lot of trouble from my Christian views. But I was born that way. I was born to like women. If I act out on that outside of what the Bible says, then I'm going to be sinning. But I was born with that nature. I was born with that nature and born with that desire. But that doesn't mean that it's okay for me to carry out that desire in any way that I want.
Well, that goes back to, and this is why I use this example so much, the drug baby that was born predisposed and already an addict. So does that make it okay for them to just live the life of an addict? No, it's still sin.
Yeah.
Regardless. So just because someone was born predisposed to homosexuality, I believe that people are born predisposed to things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that them carrying out those sinful desires, the sinful natures,
it doesn't justify carrying it out. So what this comes down to, and Marshall's putting on there, if you want to look in the comments, he's defining, because Marshall's very knowledgeable in religious things and Catholicism.
Very smart man, yes.
Very smart man. But he's talking about the definition of mortal sin is 1, it's serious, it violates the commandments. 2, it's freely chosen, and 3, it's chosen in the knowledge that it is sinful. And that's what kind of makes it a mortal sin. So so it has to be something that's by choice. But again, I think that we naturally carry out our sins. I think we are sinful by nature and we are selfish by nature. And even though we don't even know it's sin, we're carrying it out.
Right. But we do get grace on those things that
Yep.
we don't know sin. So
Yeah.
so number 3 is a very great point, right?
Yep.
So say someone's born, no religious upbringing, no exposure to the gospel, no exposure to the Bible or Christianity or any of those things.
Mhm.
They're born predisposed to homosexuality or drug addiction or any number of different sins, and they carry out those things not knowing that it is a sin. Are they held accountable for those sins?
That's a very great question. As a pastor, I would say that's why there's a camp that could say yes, because again, how responsible are we for our choices? If I choose not to follow God and I teach my children that there is no God and I drill into them that there is no God and they live their life not believing in God, then I would say that their belief system, if they never come in contact with someone who's a believer and they never, I would say really that their life is on my choice. That
Yeah.
that my sin caused them to make that choice and I mean, there's a lot of things in there that can go.
And reality
way
is,
out
at the
more.
end of the day, there's only one unpardonable sin.
And that I don't like the word unpardonable, but yeah, it's simply rejecting the free gift.
Yeah.
And I have a whole thing about that. I'll talk about that at another time. There's only a few minutes left, but I wanted to get into why, because we got like 4 minutes left here, and I wanted to get into why and the main basis of where I'm coming from in this, and that is, I believe that God calls us to love one another.
Yeah.
I believe that's in the Bible. You and I can agree on that. And that God, and I believe that the church should be teaching that love, that we love others, that we love God, love others. Jesus said all the commandments come down to love God and love others. Those are the two things. And I think if the focus of the church, if the church and the pastors and the people of the church have their patriotism and their country and their nationalism tied to their religion, tied to their faith, then the way they win is by making their country a Christian nation, by enforcing their beliefs on others. And I think that's dangerous, because then the people who are lost, the people who do need Christ, they see themselves, they look at you as a Christian, they say, you see me as the enemy. How will we ever win them over? How will we ever win them over if we make them the enemy that we're trying to defeat? If we say your thoughts are wrong, we're going to make laws to punish your thoughts and make sure that your thoughts and your ideology never reach our kids and never reach into society, because we believe that our ideology is better, which as a Christian, I do believe this ideology is better. But the approach to make it happen, I don't believe that the church should be trying to make a Christian nation through politics, through laws, codifying it. I think the church should be trying to make
you'll never be able to achieve. That's an unachievable goal.
Exactly. But I feel like that's the direction the churches in America and Christians in America think that we're supposed to do.
But I also think that the country needs to live up to some form of morality, whether they're Christian or not.
And that can be part of the discussion. I feel that the responsibility of the church is to save people and to work in the lives of individual people. That you as a Christian, the most important thing that you can do is to know your neighbor, get to know them, be an example of Christ to them. So when you win them over, the more people, the Bible says, go and make disciples, not make Christian. Jesus said, go and make disciples. He didn't say go establish a Christian nation. I mean, that was the Great Commission. He didn't say go and make godly nations. He said, go and make disciples. And when we make disciples, when we really bring in the person next to us and disciple them, and when they learn to love and they turn away from their sin, and then they go and do the same to the next person, we will automatically have a Christian nation. We will have a Christian country. We'll have a Christian world. We will have the result that we want if we do it God's way, instead of trying to go through the route of politics.
Well, but if you consider that that's an unachievable goal, because even in heaven there was corruption, because Lucifer fell with a third of the angels, right? So if we know that in heaven that was an unachievable goal, we know here on earth that is considered Satan's dominion, that it's an unachievable goal. So are we to allow the erosion of morals and a moral society just simply because we believe that we should only do it through the church when that's an unachievable goal?
Well, like you said, both of them are unachievable. Perfection is unachievable on earth.
Right. But we can keep a moral society that maintains a level of values.
Yes, based on objectifiable harm. That's what I'm saying. Yes, we keep a moral society based on objectifiable harm, not subjective. You know, making laws about protecting people's lives and protecting their property and protect that's we maintain a code like that. But implementing and you will also now go to church every Sunday. That's going to be in law, and you will crossing that line to
I think there's a line both ways.
Yes, but I just think that line is a little closer towards objectifiable than it is towards subjective.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So this has been United Opposition. The road is narrow. Road is narrow. That right. Marshall's post on there. This has been United Opposition, normally with Scott and Marshall. Mike sitting in. Thank you very much for joining this
thanks
discussion.
For letting me be here.
Absolutely. We'll see what happens next time. But Marshall, I believe, will be back next week.
Looking forward to having you back, Marshall.
Yep. So until next time, God bless you guys. Have a great week.